The grand crystal chandelier blazing overhead, its golden light spilling across a long mahogany table set with fine china and blood-red wine. There, at the center of it all, sat Elena Hayes, beautiful, composed on the outside, but shattering inside. Her sapphire blue gown clung to her like armor that was already cracking. Her hands were clasped so tightly on the table that her knuckles had gone pale, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light like a silent scream. Directly across from her, her father-in-law, Theodore Hayes, thrust his finger straight at her face, his deep, booming laugh rolling through the room like thunder. "Look at her," he roared, eyes gleaming with cruel joy. "Sitting here like she still belongs. Girl, you never did." Beside him, his wife Margaret, silver curls perfectly coiffed, pearls glowing against her neck, joined the attack, her own manicured finger jabbing the air as tears of wicked amusement rolled down her cheeks. "Lord have mercy, you really thought you could keep the Hayes name? How embarrassing for you, baby. How downright pitiful." Behind Elena stood her husband, Marcus, tall and sharp in his black tuxedo, his strong hand resting heavy on her shoulder, not to comfort, but to claim, to display her like a trophy he was about to discard. Pressed against his side, her body sparkling in a tight sequined dress that threw rainbows across the walls, was Jasmine, his secret lover for the past 2 years. Jasmine smiled down at Elena with pure, glittering venom, one arm looped possessively through Marcus's, her red lips curved in triumph. The air smelled of roasted duck, expensive cologne, and the faint sweetness of the massive white rose centerpiece, but none of it could cover the stench of betrayal. Wine glasses sat untouched, forks lay still, the only sound was their laughter, ugly, triumphant, relentless. Marcus leaned down, his breath hot against Elena's ear. "I invited you here tonight for this exact reason, Elena, so the whole family could see you for what you really are. Broke, ordinary, replaceable. Jasmine is the woman who belongs at this table now. You're done." Elena felt every word slice into her like glass. Her chest tightened until breathing hurt. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. The humiliation was total, public, cinematic in its cruelty. This was the man she had loved, the family she had tried so hard to earn, now pointing at her like she was trash they couldn't wait to throw out. But here is the part no one in that glittering room could possibly know, and the part that makes this story so dangerous. Elena Hayes was not the broken woman they saw. She was something far more powerful, something immense, something that had been hiding in plain sight for years. The laughter swelled again. Theodore slapped the table. "Sign the divorce papers tonight, Elena. Walk away with nothing but the clothes on your back. That's all you deserve." Elena stayed perfectly still, her clasped hands never moving. But deep in her purse, resting silently against her chair leg, her phone had just vibrated once. A single notification. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. Because the tables were already turning. They just didn't know it. The laughter eventually subsided into smug, satisfied chuckles, the kind people make when they believe they've already won. Theodore leaned back in his high-backed chair, swirling the last of his Bordeaux like a king surveying a conquered land. Margaret dabbed delicately at the corners of her eyes with a linen napkin, still giggling softly at the memory of her own best lines. Marcus finally released Elena's shoulder. He stepped around the table to take the empty seat directly beside Jasmine, pulling her chair even closer until their thighs touched under the tablecloth. He draped one arm across the back of her chair in a gesture so casual, so possessive, it felt rehearsed. "Elena," he said, voice suddenly softer, almost pitying now that the spectacle was over, You can still leave with some dignity. No one's stopping the door. Just sign. We'll even let you keep that little apartment downtown you love so much. Call it a parting gift." Jasmine let out a delighted snort, covering her mouth with long lacquered nails. "The one with the leaky faucet? How generous, baby." Elena still hadn't spoken, not one word since she'd walked through the 12-foot double doors 47 minutes earlier. Her silence had been interpreted, correctly at first, as shock, as shame, as defeat. But now it was beginning to feel different, heavy, deliberate. Theodore noticed it too. His thick silver brows drew together slightly. "You got something to say, girl, or you just gonna sit there looking pitiful all night?" Elena lifted her eyes slowly. They weren't wet with unshed tears anymore. They were clear, almost unnervingly calm. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, measured, carrying just enough to reach every corner of the room without strain. "I'm not signing anything tonight." A ripple of fresh amusement passed around the table. "Oh, Lord, here we go," Margaret sighed, rolling her eyes towards the chandelier. "She's about to give us the 'I still love him' speech. Save it, honey. We've all heard it before." But Elena wasn't looking at Margaret. She was looking at Theodore. "Mr. Hayes," she said, quietly, almost conversationally, "you've been running Hayes Global Logistics for 38 years, built it from a 2-truck operation your father started in '68. Proudest achievement of your life, correct?" Theodore's smile faltered for half a second before he barked out another laugh to cover it. "What's that got to do with anything?" Elena didn't answer the question. Instead, she continued, tone still soft, almost conversational. "Last quarter, international container shipments through the port of Savannah dropped 17% year over year. You blamed the new tariffs, but the real problem was the sudden cancellation of 3 major contracts with Southeast Asian manufacturers, contracts worth $87 million annually. You still haven't replaced them." Theodore's face hardened. "That's confidential boardroom information." "Is it?" Elena tilted her head slightly. Funny how boardroom secrets stop feeling secret when the board changes hands. A long, confused beat. Marcus laughed, short, sharp, disbelieving. "What are you talking about, Elena? You don't even understand half the words coming out of your mouth right now." She turned her gaze to him then, really looked at him, not with anger, not with hurt, with something colder, something final. "I understand more than you think, Marcus." She reached down slowly, deliberately, and lifted the small black leather clutch she'd carried in with her, the same clutch Jasmine had mocked earlier. Who brings a work bag to a dinner party? When Elena first arrived. Elena placed the clutch flat on the table in front of her, opened it, removed a single sheet of paper folded once. She slid it across the polished mahogany towards Theodore. No one moved to touch it at first. Then Theodore reached out, almost against his will, and unfolded it. It was a single-page notice, corporate letterhead, clean, official, dated 3 weeks earlier. Notice of majority share acquisition. Hayes Global Logistics Incorporated, 100% of Class A voting shares now held by HE Holdings, LLC. Effective immediately, the Board of Directors is hereby reconstituted as follows. Elena Hayes, Chair and Controlling Shareholder. 3 new names no one recognized. Theodore's hand began to tremble, just a little, just enough for the paper to flutter. Margaret leaned over to read it. Her pearls clicked together as she jerked backwards. Marcus snatched the page from his father's fingers. His eyes raced down the lines, then up again, then down again, as though the words might rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic if he looked hard enough. This is fake," he whispered. Elena spoke again, still calm, still quiet. "It's not fake." She reached back into the clutch, pulled out her phone, tapped the screen once. The dining room speakers, normally reserved for soft jazz during family dinners, crackled to life. A woman's crisp British-accented voice filled the room. "This is Victoria Langston, General Counsel for HE Holdings. Confirmation of lawful share transfer completed at 4:17 p.m. Eastern Time today."
All prior officers and board members of Hayes Global Logistics are hereby notified that their authority has been terminated. Any further exercise of executive power will be considered corporate trespass. Security protocols are now active." The line went dead. Silence swallowed the room whole. Jasmine's mouth was open, but no sound came out. Theodore stared at Elena like he was seeing her for the first time. Marcus's hand was still gripping the paper so hard it was crumpling at the edges. Elena folded her hands again, exactly the way they'd been folded when the laughter started. Only now, the chandelier light caught something different in her eyes. Not pain, not fear. Power. Pure, patient, terrifying power. And the night was only just beginning.
The silence that followed Victoria Langston's recorded voice was so complete it felt like the room had been vacuum sealed. Even the faint hum of the central air seemed to have stopped. The chandelier crystals no longer tinkled, the candles in their silver holders no longer flickered. Time itself appeared to pause, waiting for someone, anyone, to breathe. Theodore was the first to move, not dramatically, just a slow, heavy lowering of his head until his chin nearly touched his bow tie. The man who had built an empire with his bare hands, who had stared down union bosses and federal regulators without blinking, now looked suddenly smaller inside his custom-tailored suit. "You," his voice cracked on the single word. He cleared his throat. Tried again. "You bought my company." Elena corrected him gently, the way one corrects a child who has misspoken. "I bought our company, Theodore, the one you stopped paying attention to." Margaret's hand flew to her throat, fingers closing around the triple strand of pearls as though they could anchor her to reality. "This is impossible. The shares were locked. Family trust. Ironclad." "They were," Elena agreed, "until 6 months ago, when the trust's fiduciary, your cousin Raymond, quietly accepted a private offer for the Class A voting block, an offer he couldn't refuse, not because of the money." She paused, letting the sentence hang just long enough for the implication to land. "But because refusing would have meant explaining to the IRS why he'd been skimming 7-figure consulting fees from the company for the last 9 years without board approval." Theodore's head snapped up. "Raymond wouldn't." "He did." Elena's voice remained even. "I have the wire transfer records, the backdated invoices, the emails where he begged the buyer not to expose him. I kept them private, for now." Marcus shoved back from the table so violently his chair legs screeched against the hardwood. "This is blackmail." "No, Marcus." Elena finally looked directly at him, really looked, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop another 5 degrees. "Blackmail would be me threatening to release those documents unless you do what I want. I'm not threatening anything. I'm simply stating facts. The company is mine. The board is mine. The voting control is mine. And tonight," she let her gaze travel slowly around the table, lingering on each face, "tonight was the first time I chose not to hide it anymore." Jasmine, who up until that moment had been frozen in glamorous shock, suddenly found her voice. It came out high and brittle. "You're lying. You're just some nobody he married because she was convenient. You don't have that kind of money." Elena tilted her head, studying Jasmine the way one might study an interesting but ultimately irrelevant specimen. "I didn't have that kind of money when I married Marcus. I made it, quietly, methodically, while he was busy with board meetings he never actually prepared for, while you were sending each other photos at 3 in the morning, while the whole family laughed at the quiet little wife who never spoke up. I was building something else entirely." She reached into the clutch once more, this time producing a slim, matte black credit card with no logo, no name embossed on the front,
just a single horizontal silver line running through the center. She placed it face up on the table. This is the HE Holdings corporate card. It has no limit because the account it draws from has no ceiling. Last month alone, it processed 214 million in verified transactions. Most of them were acquisitions. Some were personal. Marcus stared at the card as though it might bite him. "You've been lying to me for years." "No," Elena's correction was swift and surgical. "I've been silent. There's a difference. You never asked what I did with my evenings while you were out. You never asked why I traveled so much for charity work. You never asked why certain competitors suddenly folded right before they could underbid us on major contracts. You assumed I was nothing. That was your mistake." Theodore's voice rasped out again, weaker now. "How long?" Elena met his eyes without flinching. "Long enough to watch you mortgage the Savannah headquarters to cover the dividend you insisted on paying yourself last year, even though the cash flow couldn't support it. Long enough to see you sign off on the sweetheart deal that gave Marcus a $7 million bonus for strategic oversight, while the long-haul division lost 32% market share. Long enough to realize the Hayes name only still meant something because I kept it breathing behind the scenes." Margaret let out a small, broken sound, half sob, half gasp. Elena's expression softened for the first time that night, not with pity, with something closer to regret. "I didn't want it to come to this," she said quietly. "I really did. I wanted to belong to this family. I wanted Marcus to look at me the way he looked at her." She nodded once towards Jasmine, but with real feeling, instead of possession. "When that never happened, I stopped begging for a seat at the table. I bought the table, and the room, and the house it sits in." She stood then, slowly, gracefully, the sapphire gown catching the light like dark water. "I'm not here to destroy you, not completely, but I am here to make sure you never forget who actually built the life you've been living." She turned her attention to Marcus one last time. "You wanted a public humiliation tonight. You got one, only it wasn't mine." She picked up the single sheet of acquisition notice, folded it once more, and slipped it back into her clutch. "I'll be in the Savannah office tomorrow morning at 8. New executive team starts then. Theodore, you're welcome to attend as a consultant, non-voting observer status. Marcus, your employment agreement is terminated effective immediately. Severance will be calculated according to the minimum required by law. Nothing more." She paused at the head of the table, looking down at the wreckage of what had once been her in-laws' proudest stage. "One last thing," she said, voice dropping to something almost gentle. "The house you're sitting in right now, it's no longer in the family trust. It closed escrow this afternoon under HE Holdings. You have 30 days to vacate, or security will escort you out." Jasmine made a strangled noise. Elena didn't look at her. She simply turned and walked towards the double doors she had entered through an hour earlier, head high, shoulders back, heels clicking with quiet finality across the hardwood. No one tried to stop her. No one dared speak. The chandelier light followed her like a spotlight, turning her silhouette into something regal, untouchable, inevitable. She reached the threshold, paused, glanced back over her shoulder at the stunned, silent family she had once tried so desperately to please. "Good night," she said, and then she was gone. The heavy double doors had barely clicked shut behind Elena when the dining room exploded. Marcus was on his feet first, slamming both palms onto the mahogany so hard the crystal glasses jumped and wine sloshed like blood across the white linen. "She's bluffing!" he roared,
but his voice cracked on the last syllable, betraying him. "That paper's fake. The recording's fake. She's been planning this like some cheap soap opera villain." Theodore didn't move. He simply sat there, staring at the empty space where Elena had stood, the acquisition notice still crumpled in his lap like a death warrant. The man who had once commanded rooms full of union leaders and senators now looked 80 years old in a single heartbeat. Margaret's pearls clicked wildly as her hands shook. "Call the lawyers, Theodore, right now. Raymond must have been blackmailed. We'll fight this. We'll—" "Fight with what?" Theodore's voice was a hollow rasp. "She owns the voting shares. She owns the debt we took on last year. She owns the goddamn house we're sitting in." Jasmine's sequined dress glittered mockingly under the chandelier as she rose, lipstick smeared from where she'd bitten her lip in panic. "This is insane! Marcus, baby, do something! You can't let her—" Marcus rounded on her so fast she flinched. "Shut up, Jasmine. Just shut up." The words came out sharp, ugly, the mask of charm finally ripped away. He turned back to his father. "Dad, tell me this isn't real. Tell me we still have leverage." Theodore lifted his eyes slowly. For the first time in Marcus's life, they held no pride, no reassurance, only exhaustion and something dangerously close to fear. "Son, she didn't just buy the company. She rescued it. While we were busy throwing parties and writing 7-figure bonuses to ourselves, she was the one quietly buying up every distressed contract we lost. She kept the lights on, and we never even noticed." The silence that followed was worse than the laughter had ever been. Margaret began to cry, real tears this time, not the theatrical ones from earlier. "All those years I called her quiet little Elena. I told the bridge club she was lucky to have us. I told her to her face she'd never be one of us." Marcus paced like a caged animal, yanking at his bow tie until it came loose and dangled like a noose. "She played me. She played all of us, for years." Outside, in the circular driveway, Elena slid into the back of a matte black Maybach that had been waiting in the shadows the entire evening. The driver, her longtime head of security, nodded once without a word. As the car pulled away, she finally allowed herself one slow, controlled breath. The humiliation she had swallowed for 2 hours still burned in her chest, but now it was fuel, not poison. She opened her clutch, took out the corporate card, and ran her thumb across the silver line. "Victoria," she said into the phone, voice steady. "Activate Phase 2, effective immediately." By 7:45 a.m. the next morning, the Savannah headquarters of Hayes Global Logistics looked like a fortress under new management. Armed security in crisp black uniforms stood at every entrance. The old company logo on the glass doors had already been covered with temporary EH Holdings signage. Employees arriving for the day whispered in clusters, phones out, recording discreetly. At exactly 8 a.m., Elena Hayes walked through the front lobby in a tailored charcoal pantsuit, sapphire earrings still in place from the night before. No one had ever seen her here in anything but modest dresses and polite smiles. Today, she moved like she owned the marble beneath her heels, because she did. Theodore arrived at 8:17, tie crooked, eyes bloodshot. The new security guard at the executive elevator scanned his old keycard and shook his head. "I'm sorry, sir. Access revoked. You're listed as consultant observer only. Conference room B on the 2nd floor." Theodore stared at the man as though he'd spoken another language. "This is my building." "Not anymore, sir." Marcus showed up at 8:29, still wearing the same tuxedo pants from the night before, shirt half unbuttoned, hair wild. The same guard didn't even let them pass the turnstile. "Mr. Hayes, your employment was terminated at 12:01 a.m. this morning. Your final paycheck and COBRA information have been emailed. Please remove any personal items from the premises within the hour, or they will be boxed and mailed."
Marcus's face twisted. "You can't do this to me. I built—" "You spent." Elena's voice cut through the lobby like a blade. She stood on the mezzanine overlooking the entrance, flanked by two new VPs and Victoria Langston. Marcus looked up, their eyes locked. For one raw second, the man who had once rested his hand on her shoulder like a brand now looked small, desperate, broken. "Elena, please, we can talk. We can fix this." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You invited me to dinner to humiliate me in front of the woman you chose over me. You wanted the entire family to watch me crawl. You wanted me to leave with nothing." She took one step closer to the railing. "I gave you exactly what you asked for, only the roles reversed." Jasmine stepped forward, voice trembling. "You're evil. You're actually evil." Elena's gaze shifted to her, calm, unflinching. "No, Jasmine, I'm fair. You wanted my husband. You can have whatever's left of him. But the life he promised you, the money, the houses, the status, that was never his to give. It was mine, and now it's gone." She turned to the security team. "Escort them out, politely." As Marcus and Jasmine were led towards the doors, Theodore emerged from the side corridor, shoulders slumped, carrying a single cardboard box of personal photos and golf trophies. He stopped in front of Elena's vantage point. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Theodore said the only thing left. "I was wrong about you, every single day for 12 years. Elena looked down at the man who had pointed his finger in her face the night before. "Yes," she said quietly, "you were." She gave a small nod to her assistant. "Mr. Hayes has full observer access to the board meeting next month. Make sure he has a seat at the back." Theodore's eyes filled. He didn't thank her. He simply nodded once, turned, and walked out into the Georgia sunlight, carrying the last pieces of the empire he thought would last forever. Later that afternoon, Elena stood alone in the corner office that once belonged to Theodore. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the container yard she now controlled. The Savannah River glittered in the distance, ships moving in perfect formation under her new contracts. She picked up the framed photo that still sat on the desk, Marcus and her on their wedding day, smiling like they believed the fairy tale. She opened the drawer, placed the photo inside, and closed it gently. Then she turned to the window, back straight, the city at her feet. The woman they had mocked at that dinner table was gone. In her place stood Elena Hayes, billionaire, chairwoman, architect of her own justice. And the Hayes name? It still meant something. It just meant something new now.